Welcome to Affair Crimes Uncovered. Enjoy this true crime story. In the small town of Millhaven, life was slow and steady. The town thrived on its local businesses, its schools, and the friendly faces that everyone seemed to know. The community was tight-knit, the kind of place where people rarely locked their doors, and news traveled quickly through whispers at the local diner or across the fence. At the center of this community was the Marsh family: Daniel, his wife Anna, and their two children, Josh and Lily. To the town, the Marsh family was as close to perfect as anyone could imagine. They lived in a cozy house on Birchwood Lane, a home that was always decorated for every holiday. Anna, with her bright smile, was the kind of mother who was at every school function, and she was beloved by the community. Daniel, her husband, was a respected accountant who had his own small firm. He was the picture of reliability, known for his calm demeanor and strong work ethic. The Marsh family attended church every Sunday. Daniel would lead the family in prayer, his voice soft and steady. They were often the last to leave, chatting with neighbors and catching up with friends. To everyone who knew them, the Marshes were a family that had everything together. But in reality, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Hidden behind Daniel's calm exterior was a man carrying secrets, secrets that weighed heavily on his conscience. And while he seemed to have it all under control, those secrets would eventually come crashing down, leaving the town of Millhaven reeling. Daniel's life appeared stable, but he was hiding a double life that no one in Millhaven would have imagined. Years before he met Anna, he'd made some choices that led him down a dark financial path. He had debts that were long overdue and a gambling problem that had grown silently, gnawing away at his life. What started as a few small bets escalated into a crippling addiction, one that forced him to hide more and more from the people he loved. When he first married Anna, Daniel promised himself he would leave that life behind. But gambling for him was an escape from the pressure he felt, an escape from the quiet, perfect life he thought he should want. He always thought he could handle it, that it would be the last time. But each time he lost more, he had to find a way to cover it up. As the years went on, Daniel began borrowing money from his clients. At first, he intended to pay them back right away, thinking he could win big and erase all his problems. But the money disappeared faster than it came in, and the lies grew thicker and thicker. He falsified records, moving numbers around in ways that no one else would catch. To Daniel, his ability to keep his double life hidden was a point of pride, as though it showed he was smarter than the rest. But the truth was, he was building a house of cards that would inevitably collapse. And the closer he got to losing everything, the more desperate he became to keep his secrets from seeing the light. Anna noticed the little things at first. Daniel was staying later at the office, sometimes not coming home until long after the kids were asleep. She'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty, her stomach twisting with worry. She asked him about it, of course, but Daniel would shrug it off, blaming a big project or a last-minute client emergency. Anna wanted to believe him. She'd fallen in love with Daniel for his calm, steady nature. He was the rock she could lean on, the man she thought would never keep secrets from her. But over time, her doubts grew. She'd find receipts that didn't make sense, expensive dinners and hotel stays that weren't in their town. One night, as they sat at the dinner table, Anna decided to confront him. She asked him gently if there was something he needed to tell her. Daniel smiled, his expression barely flickering. He assured her that everything was fine, that she had nothing to worry about. But even as he spoke, Anna could feel the distance between them growing. She felt shut out of a part of his life she couldn't see, a part that left her feeling alone in her own marriage. It was a crisp autumn day when Daniel received a call that made his heart pound. One of his biggest clients had noticed a discrepancy in their accounts, and they were threatening to report him if he didn't make it right. Panic set in as Daniel realized how quickly his lies were catching up with him. Over the next few weeks, Daniel was consumed by fear. His nights were sleepless, his mind racing as he tried to figure out a way to cover up his crimes. He was facing a wall with no way out, and he knew that if he didn't act soon, everything he'd worked so hard to protect would come crashing down. And that's when he made a decision that would change everything. Daniel convinced himself that there was only one solution, a final act that would keep his secrets buried forever. He knew it was wrong, knew that there were other ways out, but in his mind, He'd come too far to turn back now. As he sat alone in his office one night, he planned every detail. His hands shook as he thought about what he was about to do. He tried to justify it to himself, telling himself that he was doing it to protect his family. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was doing it to protect himself. He thought about the life insurance policies he'd taken out on Anna and the kids, how that money would be enough to settle his debts and let him start fresh. It was a thought that made him sick, but he pushed the feeling down, refusing to let himself think too hard about it. In his mind, the plan was simple, almost coldly rational. He would stage it as an accident, something tragic but explainable. He'd spent weeks setting everything up, carefully erasing any trace of his deception. To him, this was his only chance to escape the truth he had spent years running from. It was a quiet night when Daniel finally put his plan into action. The kids were asleep, their soft breathing filling the house with a peace that only made his heart ache more. He looked down at them, feeling a pang of guilt, but he forced himself to keep moving. In the kitchen, Anna was making tea, her back turned to him. She looked over her shoulder and smiled, oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold. Daniel's mind was a blur, his thoughts clouded by the weight of his decisions. He moved closer to her, his hand trembling. What happened next would leave the town of Millhaven shattered. The perfect family, the loving husband and father, was nothing more than a lie that had been kept hidden for years, only to be destroyed in a single, horrifying night. Daniel stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, watching Anna prepare tea. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, but now that he was here, the weight of his decision crushed him. His heart pounded with a terrifying intensity, his palms sweaty, his hands trembling slightly. Anna turned to him, her warm smile breaking through the fog in his mind. "Everything okay, hon?" she asked, her voice soft and caring. It was the voice that had comforted him during his darkest moments, the voice of the woman he had promised to protect. He forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." Anna walked over to him, her gaze searching his face. She reached up, gently resting her hand on his cheek. "You know you can tell me anything, right? I'm here for you." Those words hit him like a punch to the gut. She had always been there for him, no matter what. Through every high and every low, she had been his constant, and now he was about to betray her in the most unimaginable way. "I know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. For a moment he considered stopping, confessing everything, letting her see the darkness he'd been hiding for so long. But fear and shame held him back. How could he admit to the web of lies he had spun, the money he had stolen, the addiction that had swallowed him whole? In his twisted mind, he rationalized that this was the only way to protect her from the shame and ruin that would inevitably follow his secrets coming to light. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. This was for her, he told himself, for the family, to save them from the disgrace he had created. When news of the tragedy spread through Millhaven, the town was paralyzed with grief and disbelief. The Marsh family had been the epitome of happiness and stability, a model of what a family should be. People gathered outside the Marsh home, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Neighbors hugged each other, their faces etched with sorrow and confusion. How could something like this happen in a place like Millhaven? Linda, Anna's best friend, was inconsolable. She had seen Anna just the day before, and they had made plans to go shopping together later in the week. She couldn't understand it. Anna had been her confidant, her sister in everything but blood. Linda kept replaying their last conversation, searching for any sign, any indication that something was wrong. But there had been nothing. Anna had seemed happy, her usual bright, bubbly self. At the church, the pastor dedicated a Sunday service to the Marsh family, speaking about the importance of community and leaning on one another in times of sorrow. People wept openly, their hearts breaking for the children, who had barely begun to experience life. Josh had been a star on the Little League team, his laughter infectious, his spirit unbreakable. Lily was a quiet, gentle soul who loved animals and spent her weekends volunteering at the local shelter. They were good kids, the kind you couldn't help but adore. The entire town was united in their grief, but beneath the sorrow lay a growing sense of unease. Whispers circulated about what had happened, each rumor more shocking than the last. Some speculated about a possible break-in, while others wondered if it was a tragic accident. But as the investigation continued, the whispers took a darker turn, and suspicions began to fall on Daniel himself. Detectives from the county were called in, and they meticulously combed through the Marsh home, searching for clues that could explain the tragedy. They interviewed friends, neighbors, and colleagues, piecing together fragments of Daniel's life. At first, they found little to suggest foul play. Everything seemed normal, too normal, almost staged. But the more they dug, the more inconsistencies they found. Detective Harper, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for her keen intuition, began to feel that something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was hiding something. He had been cooperative during their initial interviews, expressing grief and shock, but there was a distance in his eyes, a coldness that didn't sit right with her. She noticed small details, his lack of emotion when speaking about his family, the way he avoided eye contact when they discussed his finances. It wasn't long before they uncovered Daniel's financial records, and the truth began to reveal itself. The debts, the gambling addiction, the secret accounts, each discovery painted a damning picture of a man who was drowning in a sea of his own lies. The detectives started to piece together the motive, and with every new piece of evidence, their suspicions grew stronger. One afternoon, Detective Harper sat across from Daniel in the cold, sterile room of the police station. She watched him carefully, noting every twitch, every flicker of his eyes. She pushed a file across the table, opening it to reveal pages of bank statements, loan applications, and gambling transactions. "Daniel, we've gone through your financial," she said, her tone measured but unyielding. "We know about the debts, the loans, the gambling. We know you were in over your head." Daniel's face went pale, his hands clenching into fists. He tried to maintain his composure, but his facade was cracking. The walls he had built around himself were crumbling, and he could feel the weight of his lies pressing down on him. "Look, I had some issues, yes, but that doesn't mean," he stammered, struggling to find the words. Harper leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Daniel, we're not here to judge you for your debts, but we need the truth. Your family deserves the truth." He looked away, his jaw tightening. The truth was a luxury he couldn't afford. If he admitted to everything, his life would be over. But as he sat there, staring at the evidence laid out before him, he realized that he was out of options. The lies he had lived by were no longer enough to protect him. In the quiet of the interrogation room, under the weight of Harper's unwavering gaze, Daniel felt his last shred of resolve slip away. The reality of his situation was unavoidable. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He could no longer keep the truth hidden. "I never meant for it to go this far," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I couldn't see any other way out." Harper watched him, her face expressionless, but there was a glimmer of sadness in her eyes. She had seen this before. People making terrible decisions in desperate situations, choices that couldn't be undone. He began to speak, his words coming slowly at first, then faster as the floodgates opened. He confessed to everything, the gambling, the debts, the lies he had told Anna and everyone else in his life. He explained how he had tried to manage it, convinced that he could fix it all, but how it had spiraled out of control. And then he spoke about the moment he decided to end it, the moment he chose to betray his family in the most horrific way imaginable. Harper listened in silence, her heart heavy. She knew that no punishment could ever undo the pain he had caused, the lives he had destroyed. But she also knew that the truth was necessary, a small sliver of justice for the family he had torn apart. With Daniel's confession, the case was closed, but the scars it left on Millhaven ran deep. The town struggled to come to terms with the darkness that had been hiding in plain sight, the horror that had taken root in their own community. People spoke in hushed tones, their voices filled with anger, confusion, and sorrow. The Marsh family, once a symbol of happiness and stability, had become a reminder of the fragility of appearances. Linda, Anna's best friend, visited the graves of Anna, Josh, and Lily often, leaving flowers and talking to her friend as if she were still there. She couldn't understand how Daniel could have done something so horrific, how the man she had known for years could harbor such darkness. It was a question that haunted her, a question that had no answer. The church held a memorial service for the Marsh family, a final farewell to the lives that had been cut short. People filled the pews, their faces etched with grief, holding hands as they prayed for the souls of Anna, Josh, and Lily. The pastor spoke about forgiveness and healing, but for many, forgiveness was a distant, unreachable concept. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As for Daniel, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the quiet isolation of his cell, he was left alone with his guilt and regret. The weight of his actions pressed down on him every day, a reminder of the family he had destroyed, the life he had thrown away. In the years that followed, the story of the Marsh family became a cautionary tale in Millhaven. Parents warned their children about the dangers of secrets and deception, reminding them of the importance of honesty and integrity. The community banded together, supporting each other in times of need, determined to prevent another tragedy from taking place.